it's a piece of getting stabilized people housing, and the type of things that people in transitional really look to as their dream house, because you can get a brand new house. But they are doing some rehabs also. And the interesting thing that I've observed over the last 10 years, I've probably worked on 8 different houses and all over in different places in Pinellas. And the interesting thing is they often do infill, because we're a built-out community. And when Habitat comes in and does a house, it's interesting, the neighborhood, they're usually not in the best of neighborhoods, but the improvement by the time Habitat has their house up, it's just amazing. Other people clean up their yards, paint their houses, put up little fences. They come over and talk to all the volunteers coming into their community. Little parks get cleaned up and get named. Sometimes you get a community neighborhood association active because of Habitat having come to pay attention to their neighborhood. So there's this whole community thing is really, the breakdown of that is really behind my view of what a lot of homelessness is about. But
Can we hold questions for just a
okay,
little bit?
anyway, all right, that's it for Habitat.
Okay. What I'm going to ask is keep processing all of this information. And actually, I'm Cynthia Sinclair with Resurrection House, and I'm not going to talk about Resurrection House. So I'm going to do something a little different today. I'm going to talk very quickly. I'm going to talk fast, because what we really want to do is hear from you. So please be thinking as you've listened to some of the presentations this morning, and as you listen to some of the alternatives and the solutions that are occurring, where do you see opportunities to maybe fill in gaps, to grow on what's out there, or to add something else to it? You know, some thoughts and ideas that you have, keeping in mind that there are no right or wrong answers. I say in the conversation this morning about rhetoric and language, we're not here to romanticize or demonize homelessness. So let's get that language out, and just, if we can with clear eyes, look at this as a social problem in America, because we're looking at America today, not internationally. And we say, where do we fit in finding solutions? And so our passions may be in many directions, but let's just look with clear eyes at some solutions. So very quickly, I'm going to talk about penicillin. And so why am I going to talk about penicillin? Okay, why am I talking about penicillin? Okay, because when I was thinking about what I wanted to say to you today, I started going online, and I actually came up to this really great NPR website on healthcare and the evolution of healthcare and some of the things that are happening around the world, and how we can come up with global solutions to problems that start out as very seemingly local. And in the First World War, lots and lots and lots and lots of soldiers, as well as innocent civilians, were dying of very severe bacterial diseases from the results of war, because there was nothing to deal with the infections that resulted from injury. And one man, a physician, who went back to England, who was serving in the war at that time, the only solution at the time was carbolic acid. Carbolic acid was used to clean pipes. But that was the only thing they knew to throw on wounds. And they would throw it on the wounds, and the people would still die, and they would still fester with bacterial disease. This gentleman, whose name escapes me, went back to England and spent the next 15 or so years working on discovering the solution to these bacterial infections. And only by a fluke and through his own poor housekeeping and carelessness did penicillin emerge. And they tested it on one man in the hospital who had this horrible wasting disease of bacteria. And they gave him the penicillin, and within a day, he was healing. It was miraculous. Problem was, they couldn't produce it fast enough, and he eventually died because they ran out of penicillin. Well, by the Second World War, the problem still existed. England turned to the United States. The United States was able to develop artificial penicillin and mass produce it. And so the whole world of war and the resulting injuries changed, and people were able to be healed. They didn't die from the bacterial infections. Out of that, we created other disease-fighting vaccines. And so a lot of the childhood diseases that existed, we eradicated. So now here we are in 2011, about 5 years ago, we discover super tuberculosis, super malaria, super diseases. And the vaccines and the medicines that worked before no longer work. And so people who before were working in other countries in the eradication of these diseases said, it's hopeless. They took a group of people in, I believe, Africa who were dying of what they would call super tuberculosis, and they said, we can't work with them, we have to work with the least vulnerable, not the most vulnerable, because they're going to die anyway, so we can't afford to waste our resources. Another group of doctors said, no, we're not going to do that. And they created a combination of approaches to address the disease. And of that group of people, 85% are still alive today and cured. And cured. So my whole point in that is to say that at some point we recognize a problem. And we recognize the problem and we work on it, and sometimes the first solution or the second solution or the third solution doesn't work, or it only works for a short time. And then over time we gather more data, and sometimes that takes decades. What we knew, and we heard that today, what we knew about homelessness in the 40s and the 50s and 60s, we know differently now. We have more data, we have more information. The second thing is that in order to impact the problem to any great degree, a body of people had to turn to another body of people. There had to be collaboration, there had to be agreement to look for the solution together, to set aside maybe even some differences or some different ideas about how we approach that. And then the third thing is, wow, problem solved, we're all done. And the next thing you know, there's the problem again, only it's bigger and worse than ever. You know where we are? We're at bigger and worse than ever because we have an economy in which even the middle class have lost jobs and homes. And so the problem has grown. And do we say it's hopeless? Do we say it's going to go away? Or do we look at that and say, let's come together and address it in even newer and more different ways? And looking at those best practices and what works, obviously, of which 100,000 homes is one of them. So, a little bit about Resurrection House is that rather than talking about Resurrection House, our program is a transitional residential program for families with children. And it's been in the community since 1987. Robin just finished her master's project where she spent 5 or 6 years at Resurrection House creating a database and tracking outcomes, because 10 years ago we looked at it and I said, you know, donors are becoming savvy, they want to know what you're producing, and do we really have an 80% success rate, and does it sustain itself? We think we do. And they say that people who are engaged in programs as long as we have been really know that, but we wanted to be able to quantify it. And so we created our own database and software program because there was nothing out there to do that, and we can demonstrate that. Some of the things that we've learned in our program is that working with families in transitional housing creates a couple of things. One is community. And one of the things with homelessness is that one becomes isolated. That sense of isolation and being apart, and where do you turn for help when you need it? And so one of the things that we believe is a best practice in working with homelessness is teaching people how to rely effectively on one another. And not just how to help, but how to ask for help. Because often people don't know how to ask for help. We live in a society in America where we say, pull yourself up by your bootstrings.
God helps those who help
God
themselves.
helps those
That is
who
not
help.
the Bible.
You
If
made your
anyone
bed,
ever
now
thought it
sleep
was.
in it. You know, all of those things that we say that sort of imply, you loser, how'd you get to this point? What we say with people who come into our program is you already are a success. You're already a success because you've actually survived. Now, let's take some time and look at what works and doesn't work, and let's look at some successful ways of surviving, not just hanging on by your fingertips. And so in our program, what we've learned is that some of the things that don't work is, what doesn't work is bad, 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 wrong, 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 stupid, stupid, stupid. What does work is a conversation. And one of the things that I think is an advantage in transitional housing, where I think just housing alone is not an advantage, is that we have people who can be in a conversation in a flash. And so there's instant feedback. There's not a week that goes by where if something happens on Monday, you have to wait for somebody to show up, or you go somewhere in a week and have that conversation and its history. It can be dealt with immediately. So what's happening is people are very rapidly working on goals and moving forward on them, because day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year, it's being tracked and encouraged. We're coaching people. The object is that you say to me, this is what I want to do with my life. We don't say to you, this is what you need to do with your life. You say, this is what I want to do with my life. And we say, okay, let's sit down and work out how you make the steps for that to happen. And then week by week, we're going to look at those steps and we're going to work on progress. And progress begins with very small achievements. And then gradually, you build on that progress. And within months, when success occurs, it becomes captivating. You're captured by your own success. And when something happens and you need somebody there to coach you and cheer you on, that person is there. And we see that happen over and over again. But the other part of that is that conversation is not about what you're doing right or what you're doing wrong. It's about, you have said to me this is what you want. So I'm going to hold you to your word, and we're going to have a conversation about that. So that conversation, again, is going back to that sense of community, and that there are people who are working on your success, but you're there in that conversation. It's empowering. It's empowering the homeless to achieve those results themselves. LaShawn is a Resurrection House participant. She works for us. She will have her degree in about 2 weeks and then go on for her bachelor's degree. She has paid off how much debt this year? Almost $10,000. Jordan, I know you're a teenager, you hate to be pointed out. Jordan is now, what, the second highest student in her school. She's just extraordinary. She volunteers almost every week to take care of the infants while the adults are in life skills. Even the children are taught to be philanthropists. What we're teaching we say to people, why shouldn't you have a piece of the pie? If I were going to be an advocate for anything, I would be an advocate for saying, if you want it, why shouldn't you have it? And we're here to help you figure that out, how to figure that out, not to impose a solution on you. And that's what we believe works best. So I'm going to stop right now because we really need to take time to have a conversation. And I would say that perhaps first, let's start with a few questions.